All right, good morning. Last week I had the opportunity to talk to you about humility, and I was really blessed this week. I had a couple people reach out and tell me, last week I talked to you about generosity, and I was really blessed this week because I had a couple of people reach out and tell me about ways that they were able to be generous. And a lot of people said that they found that they were generous in small ways. But I had a friend reach out, and he shared a song with me. And the song is called Small Sacrifice. And actually, somebody who attends this service, his name's Terry Brady. He sits in the back. He wrote this song, and it's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's Small Sacrifice by Terry Brady. And it was such a huge blessing to me. The gist of the song is that a small sacrifice on your part can end up changing somebody's life. So just doing something small, taking a minute out of your day, can end up changing somebody's life for the better, is what that song was all about. So I highly encourage you, go check it out. Again, it's Small Sacrifice by Terry Brady. And it just fit in perfectly with what we were talking about last week. But this week, I want to talk to you about humility. And my question to start is, who is the most humble person that you know and why? And if you're having some trouble thinking about that, I want to tell you some characteristics of humble people. Humble people, they don't boast. They're grateful for every little thing. They don't belittle others. They're not jealous. They're not proud. They're not rude. They're not vain, or they're not obsessed with their own appearance. They're not materialistic. They're not possessive of things. They don't feel sorry for themselves. They're truthful people. They know how to put themselves in others' shoes and show empathy towards others. They're not judgmental, and they don't dwell on the past. So again, my question to you was, who's the most humble person that you know? So the person that I'm thinking of, they complete acts of service without bragging. They don't expect anything in return. She doesn't want to be seen. She just serves. She's empathetic. She knows how to put herself in other people's shoes. She's not boastful. So what is being humble? Well, in the Bible, humility is characterized as meekness, lowliness, and selflessness. And we can understand that it is a heart attitude and not only an outward demeanor. So it all starts with your heart. And C.S. Lewis describes it pretty well. He says that humility is not thinking less of yourself. So it's not thinking of yourself less, but it's thinking of yourself less. It's how you view yourself. Do you view yourself high on a pedestal, or are you willing to be meek, to be lowly? What do you think of yourself? Humility sometimes can be looked at as a weakness by the world, but I would argue it's actually a strength, not a weakness. And research has shown that leaders are more powerful when they're humble. So when leaders are willing to disperse their power, when leaders are willing to admit that they made a mistake, when leaders are kind and not boastful, when they are empathetic and know how to put themselves in others' shoes, they're more powerful. They get more done. And the greatest humble leader that I can think of is Jesus. Jesus humbled himself to die on the cross. And Proverbs 18:12 says, "Before honor is humility." And we know that humility lies with Jesus. I want to show you a word cloud here. And it's just words that often go along with humility. So humility is the big one. And then there's low, modesty, virtue, decency, a lack of pride, meekness, obedience, modesty, simplicity. That's what being humble is all about. The lack of pride there, that's a big one. Being humble is being able to resist pride. We know that God hates pride. Pride is when you have too high of an opinion of your own self. And the reason why we often do bad things is because those bad things we're doing are rooted in pride. But we know that humility, being humble, will always beat pride. God wants us to be humble. God doesn't want us to be prideful. The Bible tells us that we should be humble, that we should live a modest life, that we should think of ourselves as lowly, that we need to be obedient to God's word. People often have a misconception about humility. They also often have a wrong idea about God and the Bible. Humility does not mean that you need to be weak, and it doesn't mean that you need to let people walk all over you. We know that Jesus was the most humble person to walk the earth. And God tells us that the lowly and the meek are blessed. The disciples, however, you can kind of get a sense that they disagreed with this, that they thought that Jesus should be held higher, that people should be bowing down and worshiping him. But we know that Jesus stayed humbled. And he even went as far as washing people's feet. So this sermon series that Pastor Charlie is going through is the marks of a disciple. So what does it mean to be a disciple? Well, part of being a disciple means that you're going to be humble. And it means that you're going to follow Jesus' example. And Jesus set the example for us that we need to be humble, especially when he went as far as washing people's feet. I'm not saying that you have to wash people's feet, but I'm saying that you should think about your actions. Think about the way that you're conducting yourself. Are you humble? Are you boastful? Are you prideful? Or are you willing to admit that you have weaknesses? Are you willing to be meek? Are you willing to admit that there are things that you could work on in your own life? Do you brag? Think about the way that you're conducting yourself. We know that Jesus was a very humble leader, and because of that, he is the most powerful leader in the world. We want to make sure that we're conducting ourselves like Jesus. I have some Bible verses that I want to share with you. Deuteronomy 8:17-18 says, "He did all this so that you would never say to yourself, 'I have achieved this wealth with my own strength and energy.' Remember the Lord your God. He is the one who gives you power to be successful, in order to fulfill the covenant he confirmed to your ancestors with an oath. Remember the Lord your God. He is the one who gives you power to be successful." God is the one who's giving you everything that you need to be successful. And when you find yourself being successful, remember that it wasn't you who did it, it was God who did it. And this goes along with 2 Corinthians 12:7-10. It says that my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And this is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weaknesses. I delight in my weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. For when I am weak, then I am strong. We know that God supplies power for us when we are weak. And oftentimes, it's hard to delight in weakness. We don't want to admit that we are weak. We might even be embarrassed to admit that we're weak. But part of being humble is admitting those moments when you're weak. Another Bible verse for you is Proverbs 12:1. It says, "To learn, you must love discipline. It is stupid to hate correction." So humble people are going to be willing and able to take correction and feedback. Humble people can admit that they make mistakes. And when we admit that we make mistakes, when we admit that we are weak, that's when God can really work in us. That's when God's power can be shown. God doesn't expect you to be perfect. God doesn't expect you to be strong all the time. God doesn't God is expecting you to make mistakes and to be weak. And when you are weak and when you're making mistakes, that's when God's power is perfect. That's when he can work the best. Because we know that when we are weak, then we're actually strong. Because God is working through us and God is giving us that strength. So today I want to talk about 9 ways that you can practice humility. And some of these are a little direct. And when I was figuring out this sermon and writing it, I know that I struggle with a few of them. And I'm definitely not pointing anyone out or singling anyone out. I know I struggle with these, and I know that that's something that I need to be working on. So that's just my warning. Some of these are a bit direct, and that's okay. We know that we are human and that we make mistakes and that we have a lot to learn and grow. That's part of being a disciple, being able to take correction and learning and growing. But the first one, 9 ways to practice humility, is to speak about yourself as little as possible. And that goes back to this idea of pride. So just some things that prideful people do, if you're a little confused. Prideful people will give opinions and quick judgments. They're overly concerned about what other people think. They can be defensive or easily offended. They feel unenthusiastic or maybe even threatened by other people's success. They spend more time talking than listening. They don't pray. They're fearful of the future. And they post things or they talk about themselves frequently to make themselves known. And we know that pride is super hard to get rid of. And we also know that God hates pride. It's hard to get rid of, and it's so hard. And oftentimes we just get comfortable with it. We get comfortable with speaking about ourselves frequently. But that's not what humble people do. And we know that Jesus has called us to be humble people. It says, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. And it's not maybe I'll lift you up. God's not saying maybe I'll lift you up. He says he will lift you up. So we have to get rid of pride. Proverbs 16:18 says that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. To be humble means that you're not constantly talking about yourself. Oftentimes when we speak about ourselves, we end up bragging. That's not what humble people do. Humble people don't need approval or attention from others. They do things, they volunteer because they know it's the right thing to do. And they know that God is watching and that God will eventually reward them. Humble people don't need approval from other people. They need approval from God. So speak about yourself as little as possible. Don't brag. Second thing that humble people do is that they mind their own business. And this one's a hard one for me. And I'm sure that it's hard for many of you too. But we often hear that there are 3 sides to every story. So there's what you say happened, there's what the other person said happened, and then there's what really happened. The reality here is that whatever the situation is, you don't actually know the whole story. You know your story, but you don't know somebody else's whole story. And it's really easy for us to assume that we know what's going on, and it's easy for us to judge people. But we are not the ones who should be judging people. God is the only one who should be judging people because God knows the whole story. We don't know the whole story. In reality, you really know nothing about what's going on in other people's situations, in people's lives. So mind your own business and don't judge people because that's for God to do. That's not for us to do. Our job is to love people without judging them. Humble people just love people without having to know their whole story. That's between the other person and God. And if they tell you, then absolutely help them. Absolutely. But until they tell you, just mind your own business and show them love and kindness. The next one is don't try to manage other people's affairs. Again, unless somebody asks you, Most times, people would prefer that you keep your advice to yourself. And part of being humble is allowing people to make their own choices and not offering your personal judgment about those choices. I think a lot of times when we try to give advice, even if it's well-intentioned on your part, we end up being prideful, or we end up bragging, or maybe even bringing somebody down. So many times, it's really just best if you keep your advice to yourself, unless somebody asks. If somebody asks, absolutely. But a lot of times, it's just best that you keep your advice to yourself so that you don't end up bragging, or you don't try to make somebody feel like you're better than them. Again, we don't know people's whole stories. That's between them and God. And if they're willing to tell you, that's great. But it might not be their time to tell you yet. And that's okay. As Christians, it's our job to help and to love people and to be kind to them. That's what God calls us to do. Not try to act like we're better than somebody. Proverbs 27, 1-2 says, "Don't brag about tomorrow, since you don't know what the day will bring. Let somebody else praise you, not your own mouth. A stranger, not your own lips." If you do something really great, that's amazing. But don't brag about it. Let somebody else give you that praise. Don't talk about yourself. Don't brag about yourself. Don't try to make people feel like you're better than them. Let somebody else give you the praise. Or even better, just wait, because we know that God will reward us in his own time. Proverbs 26:12 says that there is more hope for fools than for people who think they are wise. If you think highly of yourself, if you think that you are wise, if you think that you know it all, this might be true. There's more hope for fools. There's more hope for people who think less of themselves than for people who think that they are the best. Jeremiah 9:23-24, it says, "This is what the Lord says. Don't let the wise boast in their wisdom, or the powerful boast in their power, or the rich boast in their riches. But those who wish to boast should boast in this alone, that they truly know me and understand that I am the Lord, who demonstrates unfailing love, and who brings justice and righteousness to the earth, and that I delight in these things. I, the Lord, have spoken." Nobody likes it when people boast. Nobody likes it when the rich are boasting about how rich they are, or when the powerful are boasting about how powerful they are. Nobody likes it. Be humble. And if you need something to boast about, really the only thing we should be boasting about is how great God is. We should be talking about all the good things that God has done for us, all the ways that Jesus has shown us love, all the great things that we are looking forward to as Christians. If we're going to boast, then we're going to boast about God, not about ourselves. That's what humble people do. Stop being nosy. This was another one that I tend to struggle with. We know that curiosity not only killed the cat, but it killed many friendships. Here we need to talk about balances. So there's a big difference between showing interest in another person and showing that you care about them and that you want to help them, and then also maybe just being annoying or persistent. As Christians, we need to accept what people share with us. People oftentimes don't want to share the whole story. They might not be ready yet, and that's okay. We need to accept what people share with us. And if you ever think that you're starting to cross the line into being nosy, then you probably have already gone too far, and you know that it should be time to dial it back a bit. People don't like it when you're nosy. People don't like it when you're trying to stick your nose into their business. As Christians, we want to help people and we want to love people, but we don't want to be persistent. We don't want to be annoying. We just want to show them love and kindness through our actions. Humble people aren't nosy. Another thing that humble people do is that they can accept contradictions and corrections with a smile. There's going to be times when somebody's going to disagree with you and they're going to try to correct you for something. So maybe they disagree with your opinion. And whether that person is right or wrong, it doesn't matter. And your response should always be the same. As Christians, we have a responsibility to conduct ourselves in the right way. So the first thing I have for you is don't try to take anything the other person says personally. Don't take things personally. Accept the other's opinion and give up any need that you have to prove you're right. Give up any need that you have to prove you're right. And when you do this, make sure that you're keeping your nonverbal cues in check, so like your facial expressions. When you accept somebody else's opinion, but you're looking emotionally overwhelmed, like maybe you have your arms folded and there's a scowl on your face, it's not going to help the situation. Just smile and accept the other person's opinion as just that. It's an opinion. They could be right or they could be wrong, but it's just an opinion. Our job isn't to get angry and to yell at somebody. Our job isn't to get angry and start arguing with someone when they correct us or give us our opinion. I have my opinions, you have your opinions. We all have our own opinions. Sometimes we'll agree with people and sometimes we'll disagree with people, but as Christians, it's our job to smile and to love the other person and to be humble, regardless if you agree or disagree with them. Humble people ignore the mistakes of others. There's a saying, it says, people will always forget what you told them, but they will never forget how you made them feel. I know I make mistakes all the time, and I also know that you make mistakes all the time, and I know that God is okay with that, because God doesn't expect us to be perfect. God tells us that we're going to be weak. God tells us that there's going to be times that we're going to make mistakes. And when we're weak and when we're making mistakes, that's when God's power works the best. That's when God can come and intervene and help us. And that's when we can give God all the glory when we get back up and we're working through his strength. But I know that I make mistakes. So it is not fair for me to throw other people's mistakes back in their faces. It's not fair for me to make fun of somebody because they made a mistake. Mistakes are opportunities to learn and to grow. And there are also times that we can show our humility. Sometimes the best thing that you can say to somebody when they make a mistake is, that's okay. I used to make that mistake all the time too. When you say something like that, that goes a long way towards showing your true humility. And it will also set you apart as a leader too. I have this conversation with my third graders almost every day. And we talk about how we are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And we should be happy that we make mistakes because mistakes help us to learn and to grow our brains. But I have a friend. He makes mistakes all the time. I will tell you, he makes mistakes all the time. But he thinks he's perfect, and he doesn't think he does anything wrong. And he will get in the other kids' faces. He'll stick his tongue out at them. He'll start doing this dance. And I sit there and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then if another kid makes a mistake, he will tell them all about it. He'll be like, oh, I can't believe you did that. I would never do that. When in reality, he does it all the time. You can pray for this little friend. He has a pretty tough life. But I have this conversation with him daily. I say, hey, Miss Brandt makes mistakes, and you make mistakes, and everybody in this room makes mistakes, and that's okay. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. Our mistakes help us to learn, and our mistakes help us to grow. But it's not okay to make fun of somebody because they make a mistake. It's not okay for me to make fun of you because you make a mistake. Because I could also make that same mistake, or I could make a different mistake. We're human. We mess up sometimes. God expects that from us, and God's going to work through us when we make mistakes. God's going to work through our weakness, and that's when we're really going to be able to see his power. John 3:30 says, John 3:30 says that he must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. So if we're making mistakes, that's okay, because God is becoming greater and greater. And then the other Bible verse that I have, sorry, it's not showing up. It's Romans 12:16. It says to live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people. And don't think that you know it all. So again, live in harmony with people. Be kind to others. Don't make fun of people. Don't hold yourself higher than somebody else. Be humble. Don't think that you know it all, because we don't. Another thing that humble people do is that they accept insults and injuries when directed their way. This is so hard to do, and it's probably a learned skill. Don't take things personally. It's so hard. But we have to change our mindset, and we have to realize that God's opinion is the only one that matters. So when somebody insults you, be assured that the problem that they're dealing with isn't you. The problem that they're dealing with is something much bigger. And you need to humble yourself by not making a big deal out of it. That's so hard. It's really hard not to take something and make a big deal out of it. It's really hard not to take things personally, especially when they hurt us. But part of being humble is being willing to pray for somebody when they hurt us. Part of being humble is being able to continue to love them and to show them grace and forgiveness when they hurt us. It's not easy, but it's what God tells us to do, and it's the right thing to do. Another hard one, accept being slighted, disliked, or forgotten. Jesus wasn't always liked. There were times when Jesus was wronged, but he still showed love, he still showed compassion and kindness to everybody. We all have this human need to be liked or to be relevant, but sometimes life moves on and we aren't as relevant as we once were, or sometimes we get hurt by others and we feel like we might not be liked. But that's okay, because Jesus set an example for us. Jesus showed us that it's okay not to always be liked, or not to always be relevant, or sometimes to even be forgotten. When these things are happening, we have to remember that Jesus went through it himself. We also have to remember that it's okay not to be liked by everybody, and sometimes people won't like us because we're Christians. Or sometimes we'll be slighted because we're Christians. And we have to remember that we are going through these sufferings in Jesus' name, because Jesus has this great reward for us. Jesus has this great plan for us that's eventually all going to come full circle. It's hard to do, but part of being humble is accepting being disliked, accepting being forgotten, accepting being wronged, and continuing to show love and mercy and kindness and grace to the people who do that to you. It's hard, but it's what Jesus calls us to do. Last one is to be kind even when provoked. So being kind even when provoked, that allows you to be a positive force in people's lives. Even if people are rude or angry with you, the act of being kind, the act of you being kind to them, it brings meaning to your life and it tends to rub off on people. A lot of times it's difficult to stay angry to somebody if they are showing you kindness. This is series. It's all about the marks of a disciple. It's how do you act? Well, humble people are going to be kind all the time, regardless of the situation. How are you acting? Be generous. Be kind. Be unselfish. Be humble. Get rid of prideful marks in your life because that's what Jesus tells us to do. Jesus didn't tell us to go and be angry with someone. Jesus didn't tell us to go and use unkind words with somebody. Jesus didn't tell us to go and make fun of somebody for making mistakes. Jesus told us to be kind. Jesus told us to be humble, to think less of ourselves and more of others. I know we already read this, but I like it, and I'll read it one more time. It says, 2 Corinthians 12:9, each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. God works best when we are weak. That's when people and you can actually see the power of God working through us. Don't be afraid to admit when you're weak. It's part of being humble. Humble people can admit when they're weak, when they make a mistake. It's okay because God can work through it. God can work through anything. I want you to think about how you can practice being humble this week. And I'll leave you with Philippians 4:3. It says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. So in humility, value others above yourselves. How can you value somebody above your own self this week? How can you be kind and unselfish? How will you practice being humble this week? That's your challenge. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for allowing us to meet here, God. I just ask that you would bless us as we go throughout this week, God. Give us everything that we need, God. We know that when we are weak, God, you are strong and that you are able to work through us. Help us to be kind. Help us to be unselfish, God. God, help us to get rid of the pride in our lives. Help us to show love and compassion and mercy to other people, God. God, help us to be humble this week. God, we know that you are humble. Jesus was the most humble leader in the world. Help us to follow your example this week. Help us to show love and compassion to everyone we meet. It's in your name I pray. Amen.